All right, going to take on all those headlines and more. I'm joined now by the national editor of the Australian newspaper, Dennis Shanahan. Dennis, great to have your company as always. I want to start with this announcement today from the Treasurer. It's not a Canberra bubble story, given the power of the Productivity Commission, given comments we know from the RBA Governor. He's got two real worries at the moment, inflation and productivity. And the Productivity Commission, independent of government, is a very big player in turning things around. Well, the appointment today announced by the Treasurer is of a bloke called Chris Barrett. They both were former Chiefs of Staff to Labor's Wayne Swan. He's an arts graduate, Barrett. He doesn't have an economics background. He's currently employed in the Victorian Public Service in the Treasury Department. I've got a big question mark here. Is he the right person? Is he too political? Is he up to the task of turning around productivity in this country? I'm not convinced. Dennis, what do you think?
Peter, I remember Mr Barrett when he was working for Wayne Swan. He had a fairly large agenda on his plate, including the resources super profit tax, dealing with the GFC, the stimuluses, and trying to deliver budget surpluses, which Wayne Swan had promised. So he's had a fairly tough introduction. But look, I think rather than the personal side of this, and I know the opposition has said it's jobs for mates and so forth, but I think a far more important aspect here is what the Treasurer proposes to do to change what the Productivity Commission actually does. He's already changed and is changing the way the RBA operates. He is now going to change, we still haven't seen a great deal of detail, as to how the Productivity Commission is going to change. Now, the one thing about having Chris Barrett as the Productivity Commissioner is that you'll have someone who understands what the Treasurer wants. There will be a great deal of empathy between the two. So what we're actually seeing here is Labor reshaping yet another institution and putting somebody familiar with them at the head of it. Now, I think this is much more important than just a single individual, and it is a way that Labor operates when in government to try and change not just the personnel, not just by putting up a mate in a job, but to change the institutions and how they operate. I mean, one of the problems with the Productivity Commission wasn't the advice it was delivering. The problem with the Productivity Commission has been that governments, plural, have basically ignored what they've said. That's the problem. That's where we are now. And so I think that the changes to the Productivity Commission and the Reserve Bank are far more important than one particular or two particular personnel appointments.
I will go back to that, I think it was in your paper, that scarifying commentary piece by Gary Banks about how far the PC, the Productivity Commission, has fallen away in its brief and how irrelevant they were, not their fault, more the response of government, which is landing on the point you're making. It's not so much that Barrett is a former political Labor staffer. If, for example, Andrew Charlton, who was obviously working for Rudd, if he wasn't in the parliament and someone of Andrew Charlton's economic clout was appointed to this position, I don't think I would be critical. What I'm critical here is there's not a demonstrated capacity of this bloke to do the job. As I said, doesn't have the background, arts graduate. He's basically been a flunky for Beasley and many others. My concern is his capacity, but also, given they both work closely with Wayne Swan, the contestability. This is the point you're making, Dennis. You want people in these institutions, appropriately, Australian taxpayers should want people in these institutions that push back on government, that give them some contestability when you've got big issues that you're grappling with, like how do we get productivity moving, how do we deal with inflation. And the Productivity Commission and the Reserve Bank and the government and indeed the Treasury Department all should be testing and prodding and challenging each other so we get the right outcome. I can't see that's going to happen.
Well, I think that is the difficulty here with appointing someone who has such empathy. And the other thing, of course, is that his latest qualification is as an advisor to the Andrews government in Victoria, which isn't doing all that well on budgetary or productivity settings.
There you go. I rest my case, Your Honour. I rest my case, Your Honour. Hey, let's talk about The Voice, because things are moving rapidly against the government. And now you've got all those moderate Liberals. You've got people like Lucy Turnbull out there. You've got Labor Senator Andrew Bragg, all pro-Voice. Realising this thing's headed for a brick wall. They all want it now postponed. Tony Abbott was out there in the media this morning. Pretty tough on the issue. Have a listen.
I don't want to see our country divided by ancestry or by race. I don't want to see Indigenous separatism reinforced in our Constitution, and I don't want to see the business of government gummed up even further. Look, I'm all in favour of Indigenous recognition, but this isn't recognition. This is a power grab by activists.
Now, I want it to be put up. I want it to fail and fail badly, so it's put away, hopefully forever and a day. But the government was supposed to tell us when this date would be at the Garma Festival in early August. We're now told the PM's not got to tell us that date. This idea of putting it off until sometime next year, of course, the Constitution says you can't, once the question passes the Parliament, Dennis, you can't put it to the people before 90 days. But it also has an expiry date. So what's the plan going on here?
Well, I think in the first instance, as far as the delay in announcing the actual date of the referendum, which sets the campaign rolling, I think that is because Anthony Albanese has seen the difficulty that The Voice is in the polling, the splits within the Yes campaign, people saying please defer it, etc. So what he is now concentrating on is a short, sharp advertising campaign where those tens of millions of dollars in advertising from corporate Australia will be able to use and try and get people in that very short campaign to change their mind. I don't think that's actually a good idea, but that's clearly where they're going. But as far as delaying it goes, the Prime Minister has shown no inkling at all that he wants to delay or defer. He simply says, well, if not now, when? And of course, that's politically he can't. To defer it is to admit that it's gone. But also there is the technical issue, which the Prime Minister himself constantly refers to, saying it must be held between October and December. And so there is legislation which sets when it will be held, the range of its period. And if that expires without being used, we have to go through the whole process again to get changed legislation or new legislation for a new referendum. I don't think that the Prime Minister is going to delay or defer the referendum.
For a long time, Dennis, the talk has been it will be mid-October. Do you think that's still the case?
I think that that's the most likely period. What we're looking at, if you have a look at the parliamentary sittings, the all-important football finals, and the proximity of Christmas in those December dates, I think mid-October, 2 dates, 2 Saturdays there are most likely. And obviously, Garma in August was considered to be the logical place to announce it. Anthony Albanese said he's not going to do that, but I still think the middle of October to avoid parliamentary sittings during the final period of the campaign.
All right, I'll leave it there. Dennis Shanahan, thank you.